I definitely, I got my start doing visuals very much as like an analog guy, and I was like really like, taking Sailor Moon VHS tapes and like flipping them out and like do it like really, in the mud really. Feedback is super sensitive to virtually everything, like the ambient light in the room, your ISO, your shutter, things like that are all gonna affect every little element that you're dealing with camera feedback. And the Lost Future is just a tool for us to unlock maybe something that we missed, something that got lost in the mix that we can revisit and maybe envision, maybe find something sacred and something that was overlooked. I don't know.
Right. Like almost, well, you said investigate. Welcome to the Visual Cast. I'm your host, Alon Hammer, aka Rem. The Visual Cast is a hybrid podcast where we interview some of the most unique, interesting, high-level, and exciting artists from all over the world. Entering into Season 2, we will be starting a monthly live stream to our paid subscribers. To join in on the live stream with Q&As, polls, and some surprises, click on the join button below. Your subscription will massively support our channel and bring us further to creating a community of like-minded individuals who love, create, and immerse themselves with the visual arts and the visual world. For those unable to join financially, don't worry. The episode, like all of our episodes, will be available on Thursdays for everyone to watch. And if you want to support us, like and subscribe and share with anybody you think will enjoy the podcast. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Now, without any further ado, here's the Visual Cast.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride.
Special guest, a lovely man, who is a super fascinating and quite high-level artist, focusing on, I would say, analog and kind of like lo-fi visuals, and he's quite the master at that. Dabbles in a lot of the liquid light stuff that we love here on the podcast, and a very talented musician. Welcome to the podcast, Grant Bouvier.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. I'm a fan of the pod, fan of the show. So I'm stoked to chat. I know. Yeah.
It's always a good place to start from the fan of the pod. And I mean, we've been trying to get this together for a while. We almost did it, and then we didn't do it, and then we almost did it, and we didn't do it. So that always feels really good when we get to do it. I'm really excited to jump in here. I like to start off kind of showing a little bit of some of the work. I have your reel here from your YouTube, so I think it's like a good kind of introduction to the styles and abilities, maybe is the right word for what you do. But please, whenever I have analog artists on, which is not that much, it's always fascinating to get like their take on like where that line is drawn, because you also do like some other stuff. I don't know, is it touch design? I'm not really sure exactly, but you do some digital stuff, and it's always cool to see like where that line is drawn and how it like affects the way that you create, because it's a totally different experience, I think.
Yeah, I think my reel's playing right here. This is, I haven't done another reel since I did this one, because I feel like this reel really I really captured a lot of the essence of some of the stuff I was working on and still am working on. I definitely, I got my start doing visuals very much as like an analog guy, and I was like really like, taking Sailor Moon VHS tapes and like flipping them out and like do it like really, in the mud, really. And I still love doing that stuff, but as kind of time has gone by and I've like gotten, started working with more artists in like more of a diverse environment, I'm really, I mean, these are all tools, these are all just tools that are meant to be, expressive items, expressive objects in like service of creating artwork, right? So I do a lot of digital. I do a lot of digital stuff now. I use my live sets and I can show. Later I'll show a little bit of like some of the way I have Resolume set up and stuff like that. Like I use digital tools very, very frequently, both in live settings, but also to create and generate stuff. As you can see in my reel, I have a lot of kind of generative stuff I've done in Max MSP, stuff I've done in Touch Designer. But then I'm also like I am in like an analog head. I like touching stuff and I like having the responsiveness and the chaoticness of analog. So I think I would kind of define myself as like a hybrid an analog digital hybrid kind of person, and I always try to have an element of both happening. I try to never just do one. I try to always have like something that's primarily analog with like some digital flavor, or vice versa, something that's like hyper digital but with some like nuanced kind of like ornamented aspect that's analog. And I think that's kind of something that's come to define at least my live sets. It's not hyper prevalent, I think, in a lot of my recorded kind of like music video type stuff, but yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying that like I really love both. I really like I'm a true believer that like everything has its place and everything does something, and I'm never I get bored. I get bored easily. So I love how incredible so many digital tools are, but I always come back to some of my favorite like tricks in the analog realm, and they inform each other. So yeah, I really like to do both, I think, and it kind of ebbs and flows, which I do more of just depending on where I'm at in like a headspace.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like I think the best, or a really good way to approach art in general, right? Is like not to be stuck into like the tool, or not to be like stuck into like one style. There's so many types of ways to do something, especially in generative art. I think it's really cool that you're coming from the background of like proper, and I say like proper, what is proper, but proper generative art, where it's like you're playing with physicality and physics and light and liquids and these type of things and feedbacks, and these are all things that are like very physical and visceral, but most of us connect to that physical and visceralness through digital medium, which is, it's not like what's better or worse. It's just an interesting kind of like a connection to see how you are connected to both. How you kind of like have your your origins and kind of like what you're comfortable or known for with this kind of analog aspect, but you're not afraid, or afraid is the wrong word, but you're not hesitant to dive into like the digital realm and apply the things that and learn from the visceralness of it into that. Like when you play with a feedback engine in Touch Designer or wherever, your knowledge of what a feedback engine does or how it works in a very like, it doesn't have to be scientific. It's just like literal or visceral is a lot more powerful in that sense. I think there's a lot of, that's very cool, I think. And I think it brings something special to the table for what you do. And I mean, you could see it in your art. It's a very unique kind of hodgepodge, mismatch, abstract kind of psychedelic vaporware, like glitch. But it's like not just that, there's something a little bit more encompassing there. And I think that's, a good way to set yourself apart from others. And I think probably a part of that is that you do mix those two mediums together in a very strong way, and you're not just tied into one thing. we were talking to our mutual friend, Liquid Light Labs, and you know, he was very interesting because also like he's the liquid light guy, but he also does lots of other types of things. And he's, you know, and the way that he kind of like approaches those things seems like he's approaching it from like an origin of like this, you know, plate-based kind of effect, but he's expressing it in a totally different way. And I think that's pretty cool. And I actually wanted to talk to you about the Excited Atoms, Dream Particles. You know, just kind of give us like a, yeah, there it is. Nice.
Right here, we got an archive copy right here for everybody. Yeah, man. I love Steve. He's like such a rad guy, and like
he is.
Something I really appreciate as somebody who has a background in education, and like, you know, I did the whole art school education thing. Steve is like he's like so happy to like answer questions and like mentor younger artists. And like I've met a lot of people who are not like that, and who are anti that stuff. And like, right. Steve is so rad and like interested in helping like artists who are coming up and stuff. So yeah, that's just my shout out for Steve, because I love Steve. And Steve, if you're watching, you're a real one. But yeah, we met each other. We did a show together in Asbury Park that my collective booked, and that was kind of, we had been like internet friends, and like back and forth. And like I bought his dyes and stuff because I wanted to get started in liquid light. And once I kind of started to get my bearings doing liquid, I got some of his nicer dyes and stuff like that, because he sells really, really good stuff at very fair prices. But so we were kind of internet friends, and you know, we had done some shows together, and he did something at the Franklin Institute down here in Philadelphia, and I did like an installation at the same event. So we had been kind of just like, you know, doing stuff in the same orbit for a bit. And he was just like, yo, I had done some other VHS tapes, and he was like, do you want to release my VHS tape? Like I have something I want to do for a tape. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. What do you know, how long is it? And he was like, it's like 30 minutes. I was like, 30 is like a little on the short side. Like, can you like fluff it out with like 10 or 15 minutes? And he was like, why don't you do like 30 minutes and we could do the 60-minute tape? And
that's awesome.
I was like, yeah, dude, let's do it. So we kind of, part of the other reason I love Steve is I feel like we're very like kindred spirits in terms of, and you already mentioned, like, he has a very similar kind of approach. He's known as like the liquid light guy, but there's so many other facets to what he does, and he has so many other skills, and like he's interested in so much stuff, and he's a really good musician, and he's just like, yeah, I mean, he would tell you he's not, like, he'd be like, I can play, but he told, you know, what I know about him is he told me he kind of started out playing music, which I started out as a musician. Yeah. So, yeah. I think we kind of created this double feature VHS, which this is the first edition, which he did on blotter paper. The cover art, you can't really tell on the camera feed, but it's on like LSD blotter paper, which he makes. The blotter paper. And that's the second edition is I did some on the yellow tapes, and that was us. Yeah, I went up to Manhattan to hang out with him for a little bit, to sign the original run covers. But yeah, we ended up doing this tape, and his like 30-minute piece is really it's really something. It's like his DJ mix is really good for it, but it's also like very heavy on like the retro future kind of analog vibe. And then sort of I was too lazy to make a track list. I did like a 1990s, like late 90s drum and bass playlist with like some of my favorite like YouTube like Blue Tenmar kind of Akwatsky type tracks, and it's a mishmash of some of my like kind of touch designery stuff, and then some other kind of glitchy analog stuff that I had been sitting on and hadn't really used for anything. So yeah, we just did a second run of them. They sold out really, really fast. So unfortunately, But I think we might do one more run. We might wait a little bit. We might wait like a couple months to do one more. But because I want to always do, I like to make. I don't just want to be a dude who makes VHS tapes all the time. Because as much as we like, it's a lot of work, and believe it or not, there's not a ton of money in it. It's like we make a little bit, but it's not.
I'm so surprised.
It's not exactly the most profitable venture, but so it's really about like when it feels special, you know. So I won't say another run of it, but Steve and I are definitely talking about doing more VHS tapes, not just me and him, but in general. We're talking about
for other people.
Yeah, starting to do like more of a VHS tape label type thing.
Hell yeah,
because
that's so cool.
Yeah, and you know, the idea is just to kind of we do everything. I mean, I do all the tape production like in house. Like I make the labels for my other tapes and everything. Yeah, like these are my tapes. The 2 tapes I did, this is the first tape I ever did, which is Occult Electronics, which is a retrospective of my work from 2019 to 2024. And this is all original music. This is all my music and my visuals on this.
Hell yeah.
And then this one was the second one I did, which is Haunted Weather. And Haunted Weather was on this very slick, transparent
cool. That's so cool.
tape. And this was this ambient record I did a couple of years back. That was like super conceptual. It was about like this renegade, this like mysterious, potentially government organization called the Esophonic Reconnaissance Agency that was like tasked with doing field recordings at like the edge of ecological disasters. And like in doing these are like field recordings, but they're not field recordings. They're like electronic music I made, like experimental music. And there's like sort of a plot line. There's like a vague plot line in these like really cryptic song titles that like are meant to describe the field recordings, but they like slowly kind of like tell this like paranormal, like, is it extraterrestrial? Is it ghosts? Is it, there was like, I was working on this like high concept thing at the time. Didn't really go anywhere. I just did the one record. I didn't do more, but it does live on this tape, which I'm gonna do more at some point.
Do you do? Oh, I lost your video feed. Oh, did I lose the connection completely? Oh, you're still there, but something happened to the video. Is that on my end? 1 second, that might be on my end. Oh, it's weird. Oh, there you are. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Are you recording them yourself, the tapes, or are you getting them made somewhere? Like.
So I have a bunch of dubbing decks that I've collected over the years. Really, mostly buying them untested, because a lot of VCRs are not functional anymore, which is something I'm going to talk about in this episode. I guess is a lot of this analog technology like was not designed to last 30 years. It was designed to last like 10 years. So like most VCR players don't work. I wouldn't say most, but I would say like 60% of VCR players don't really work and they'll eat your tapes. So to dub them, I've just been chasing down these Mitsubishi, and I can show them later when I switch to my other camera. Well, actually, let me see. I can do it right now. I hunt down these like Mitsubishi. Is that going to switch? I don't know if it's going to switch. Let me try again. Yeah, it didn't work. Did I freeze? No, okay, I'm back.
Yeah. Now you're back. You're back.
So yeah, I've just been tracking down this gear forever. And I that's kind of how I got all my analog gear, was really doing that, like finding untested shit on eBay and stuff, and just like making offers and like buying a lot of broken stuff, but also finding some diamonds in the rough. So I do all the dubbing. I make all the tapes like just in my apartment.
So cool.
Just pumping it out of my computer into a converter, into a bunch of VCR, just cutting inserts by hand and making stickers by hand.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Are you cutting? No, you're not cutting the tape. Like when you say inserts, you mean the things that go on the tape, or like the actual?
Yeah, like
tape?
these are.
Oh,
like,
okay. The inserts. Gotcha.
But like to do these shells, a lot of the time you find the shells and you have to take the shell apart to put a reel in it. So like you buy like 50, 60-minute tapes and you record them and then you take the reel out and you put it into the cool shell. So it's a very physical, it's a very time consuming physical
process. I mean, where do you even find like people that are this is like kind of a boring question, but I'm interested. Where do you find like people that are making those tapes? Like who's manufacturing that stuff?
So the short answer is nobody. There's not currently anyone that's manufacturing VC or VHS tape anymore. So basically, what you find on the internet is like dead stock, which there is a lot of. Like there's a lot of dead stock because VHS tapes got manufactured up until like 2010, 2011. Right. So it's only been like a decade. I have a guy who I go to who gets very reliable, good stuff. His name is Cryptic Carousel. If you're from New York,
that gets the good stuff.
I say Cryptic Carousel because if you're like a New Yorker or you're like, he's like a cassette guy and he does like all sorts of crazy recording stuff and he lives in the Hudson Valley. But Cryptic Carousel is like he's like a cult figure in like the New York scene, noise. Cool. And he sources them from somewhere. And I've talked to him. He's like, yeah, man, I just like get them from these warehouses that have like pallets of them from whenever. And so I buy them from him, but they're predictable. Like I know what I'm getting from him. Like I know they're going to be like consistently good. But yeah, you basically got to have a guy, more or less. You got to like yeah.
So just shifting a little bit, going a little bit back. You grew up around Philadelphia. You kind of were telling me that you frequented going to the city a lot when you were in bands and playing music and kind of in the scene. And then you mentioned you went to school for music. I'd love to just hear a little bit about growing up in Philly. You know, when did you get into music? What was your kind of like catalyst or, you know, the thing that kind of motivated you to want to be in music? Were you always creative? And then going into school, what was that kind of like going from, you know, being a kid playing music to like all of a sudden going into like an academic environment and getting engrossed into the music industry?
Yeah, so I was sort of I like never really fit in as a kid, believe it or not. You know, as this brief period of time where you're all meeting me. I like kind of you know, single mom, like lived in kind of a weirdly kind of urban town outside Philadelphia that was like sort of a little bit of a city, but not, you know. And so when I was in high school, you know, I kind of you know, I got into I was immediately, you know, when I was a little kid, I've never not been in music, and you know, I begged my mom for a guitar when I was like 10 and she got me one. But basically, you know, I started just like going out and like finding bands on Craigslist that were like looking for members in my town, and would just like go and like try out for the audition for these bands and stuff and like play in them. Never for a long time, you know, but like I met like a lot of people who kind of introduced me to like different movies and music and things like that. And so I was sort of like, I don't want to say like I hated school, because I didn't hate school, but like I was kind of like a loner, and like, you know, I knew a lot of people, but like I really like found my way kind of in like going out on my own in my youth, and like and kind of exploring. And like I didn't really have I had older siblings, but they're a lot older than me, so I don't you know, they had some influence in introducing me to stuff, but yeah, basically from a young age I realized like, okay, if I'm gonna have taste, if I'm gonna like find cool stuff and like get into cool stuff, I'm gonna have to kind of do it myself. And so I decided I was like, okay, I want to go to school for music. I want to get into recording. I want to get into production. And so I basically ended up applying to like one or two schools. One of them was the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, which is no longer in existence because it closed recently. But I ended up going. Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's crazy. I ended up going there and studying like music production. And while I was there, I went in very much being like, I want to play guitar. I want to be a musician, and I just want to like learn how to do this other bullshit. So I have skills if I need to have skills and other things. Immediately I was like, I don't give a shit about playing guitar anymore. I want to we had the fourth Moog modular ever built in our studio. Wow. It was like there's a picture of Bob Moog and Doc Chittum, who was like the head of the school of music in the 60s. They had like a picture of those guys together, installing it. And I saw it and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. That's what I care about now. That's my personality now, is that machine right there. So I immediately got like super into, and I was into electronic music before I got to college. Like I was into Human After All is like one of my favorite records in high school, and of course Justice was like super important to me. But I slowly like shifted my gears when I was in college from being like really interested in being like a musician and being a performer into being more broadly interested in art and in experimental music and things of that nature, and sound art. And I ended up graduating. And I took a year off, and I kind of like worked freelance for a year. I was kind of miserable. Was having a good time, and I ended up going to Brooklyn College, and I got my MFA in essentially sound art from Brooklyn College. And when I was there, that's when I was really exposed to video art for the first time, because I met all of these media artists. And again, I had like been aware of video art. I was like, I knew who Tachyons Plus was. I knew who BPNC was, like these analog guys. Like I had like a fledgling knowledge of it, but that was the first time I saw people like using like analog video mixers to create feedback and do camera feedback and stuff like that. And that's really like that combined with like doing some more getting into like actual performance and like performing experimental compositions and things like that, and getting more into like the gallery art space, not as an artist, but just as like a participant, really kind of opened my mind to like, oh, these things are all mutable, and all of this stuff is like fundamentally kind of the same if you open your mind enough. Like dance and visual art are not alien, like a lot of this stuff it's different vocabulary, but like the underlying like metaphors are similar. And then I graduated that. I came back to Philadelphia. I was teaching music production. I was teaching experimental music and doing some other like freelance stuff. And that's really when I was like, okay, I really like I'm still making music. I'm doing all these things, but I was starting to get opportunities to do video art. I was starting to get hiring me to do music videos and to kind of like make stuff. And then the pandemic happened, and that's like everyone had their fucking I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. Everyone had their Twitch streams, and they needed like graphics and visuals for the green screens, their Twitch streams. Right. And that's when I was like, man, this and I ended up like that kind of was like the wave that I caught, that like I never looked back. I still make music, but ever since then, like I said, like I was just glitching out like Nat Geo VHS and Sailor Moon and like Gundam for people for their Twitch streams, and then like shows started happening again, and people were like, oh, you want to come out and do this live? And I was like, do I want to come out and do this live? And I was like, I guess I do. And and that's kind of when I was like, all right, well, like I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna like invest in this and really like start to learn all this stuff and really like dive into it. And that was like 5-6 years ago now. And now it's really funny. I always think it's quite funny that's like I'm known as a visual artist when it's like not. I don't know. I still feel like I don't know anything about visual art half the time, but tell you about all sorts of like really obscure like music concrete stuff, but like not, I know names like, but like, yeah.
It's always interesting to me. There's a lot of, not a lot, but it is common for people to jump between different types of creative outlets, multidisciplinary kind of aspects of art and creation. And I love when there's like the audio to video, because it's such a big jump. It's not like going from, I don't know, analog to digital or something. It's like audio to video. It's such a big jump. Even though at the end of the day, when it comes to VJing or video art, specifically as a performance, there's so much cross connection, right? Like, understanding music composition, understanding where the music's going to go in the set, knowing, the highs and the lows and the moments and the swells and all that kind of stuff is going to make you a really good VJ, right? And then it's also going to help you kind of direct your, if you're making a music video, telling a story, etc. So I kind of think it's pretty cool that you have that background. And you did mention it now in that really awesome history and origin story of Grant. I really was loving listening to that. But when you were studying music and you decided to shift into the visual world, was there hesitancy, or maybe not from a negative, but was there like, what was the feeling? Like, what was the again, catalyst? What was the thing that pushed you kind of like over the edge to be like, I'm gonna, outside of COVID and doing the streams, but just, you're seeing all these video artists, you're seeing all these people do these things. What was like the thing of like, you have this love for music, but now all of a sudden you're doing something else?
Yeah, so I think I got pretty lucky in a few ways. I think that I was in New York. For people who maybe are younger who are listening to this show, the second, what I refer to it as the second wave of vaporwave, was really big when I was like hitting when I was in New York. And so like I think 2016, 2017, Simpsons wave, like the Simpsons wave summer was like a huge thing. Frank Jav C, George Clanton, like Nimesh, all these Negative Gemini was like that album Bodyworks had just come out. Like it was really a kind of a huge moment. Pad Chennington for you YouTube enjoyers. There were kind of all these like aesthetic things that were coalescing in 2016, 2017 in terms of like vaporwave. It was when like Hong Kong Express was really like hitting a fever pitch, and Dream Catalog had just started. Like it was kind of crazy. It was like a really, and it's sad that it doesn't get talked about more, and maybe it will in like another 10 years, but it was this super fertile moment, I think, creatively for a lot of people in that vein. And like I had always been into that stuff. I was into epic jams and that stuff when it first came out, but like being kind of in the proximity with so many of those artists, and like I wasn't like doing anything with them, but like I was in the same geographic region, and it was just such a moment, and it felt like people were doing this really, and of course, like, you can make the argument like, oh, this isn't original stuff. This isn't, but to us at the time, at like 23, 24, 25 years old, like in this space, like there was just like such a hunger and such a ferocity to a lot of what was happening. And I say all that to say like, there was such a visual component to what was happening, and there was such a visual tinge to the art form, and like, so much of that scene was the music, but it was also like there were VHS swaps happening. Visuals were half the time. The visuals were as important as the music. Like Saint Pepsi came out with that song Cherry Pepsi, and like it went viral because the visual, like it was this crazy like cut up of this Pepsi commercial that like it was just nuts. It was, and so you have artists who are really making music that was good, or maybe it wasn't even good, but like they were making this. I guess to me is it wasn't just about the music; it was about like the entire aesthetic experience. And there was a moment where I realized, like, oh, I need to create a visual component. Like that's not secondary, like that's not like just something that I'm throwing in. Like this needs to be a unified work. This needs to be like a fucking Broadway show, like the visual, the audio, the sensorial, and also like the lore, like the context, like the backstory of what this stuff is also important. I'm really, really into experimental music, and as I've mentioned, and people like The Caretaker and William Basinski and Brian Eno are people who I really, really, were really inspiring to me at the time. And they are also artists who like world build, they like not in a, they like created these worlds around what they were doing. Basinski with the disintegration loops, like if you just listen to that shit, it's like, okay, whatever. But like when you know what that shit's about, when you know like the history and how it was recorded, it's like really, really like hugely important to the work. And I think sort of the myth, I think that idea of like, oh man, the visual is so important to this. And none of these guys or people had like necessarily like visual arts degrees. They were just like people who had taste into stuff. And I guess that combined with like the idea that I was learning, in school with like this experimental music and stuff, was that like the power of this narrative building and the power of like creating these kind of unified aesthetics really just moved me and made me want to get into doing visuals. And I was definitely like apprehensive about getting into it at first because I was broke and I had like no money, and I was just like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how to edit video. I didn't know how to capture video. I didn't know shit. But as I was starting to have a little bit more money, I got like I was working as a grad assistant, and I was working like 40 hours a week, and I was able to save like several grand over the course of whatever, and I used it to like buy an analog video mixer. And like once I had that and I was starting to use it, I was like, okay, I kind of get this. And it was a lot of just trial and error. And like I guess this harkens back to like my upbringing, is that like, yeah, I was a little apprehensive, but like no one told me that I needed to be a musician. In fact, it was usually the opposite. Or like, that's like, you shouldn't do that. That's stupid. Yeah. That's a bad idea. And I was just like, I don't care, man. This is what I want to do. And I think that like growing up, having to kind of always make my own choices and like make my own taste, I wasn't really afraid to like jump into this stuff. I mean, I was certainly, it certainly took a long time. It took me, looking back on it, it's like, damn, I've been doing this a long time now. But I was just so inspired by like some of the stuff that was going on in that era, that I was like, man, if all these people who are like me, who I look at them and I think like, oh man, like, we're not that different. Like if they're all doing this really cool stuff, like I want to give it a shot. And that's kind of why I got into it at first. That was like the inspiration for getting.
So interesting, it's so interesting, like and it's so cool what you said about the vaporware scene. It's like you kind of are, as you're explaining it, that how influential it is. It influenced you to go into this realm of analog video, whereas like you're buying a video mixer where you could have bought, not could have, but you could have bought like a high-end PC, let's say, and done whatever visual arts through VJing or whatever, the normal trajectory of VJing, but you were interested because of this like genre of music that was exploding and inspiring you. You decided to go into like this, or not decided, but it would kind of pushed you into this analog place. It's really cool. It shows the kind of it shows really how inspirational and inspiring the vaporwave scene was to you. And it's really cool. And it makes sense, that kind of coming at it from such a music background, it makes sense that you would want to be comfortable in that kind of like musical realm, right? The one that inspires you. And maybe even like the analog thing felt even more comfortable to you because it was like similar, right? Like it's like a mixer.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like you're not an Ableton, you're like much more of a low end, like I like that that origin. It's very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you're kind of like getting into this whole scene. You're almost like COVID hasn't hit yet, but you're getting there. It's getting close. What got you into what got you into diving in deeper? What got you into going into liquid light? What got you going into like, okay, now that I have the video mixer, I'm going to go deeper into feedback. I'm going to go deeper into, super glitched out stuff. Was there were you just kind of feeding off of your like enjoyment from it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it in the early days, a lot of it was like I was, I was working, I was living in my dad's basement. I was like a full-time adjunct professor at the time, which if any of you, if anyone's listening and has ever taught adjunct, like full-time, quote, unquote, it's miserable. It sucks. So a lot of this stuff during like those years were pretty lean, and it was, again, earlier I said like I got really lucky because back in like 2018, 2019, you could buy like video mixers for like nothing. Like you could get you could get CR. This was before retro gaming blew up at like it is now. Like you could go get cool CRTs off Craigslist for like not a lot of money. You could buy weird video processors for like not a lot of money. So a lot of it was that it was like it was an opportunity. I was doing this at a time when it was still pretty damn accessible if you were interested in it. The bar for entry was like a fraction of what it is now. And I think that I was kind of in a place where I was like, I think there's something here, like I felt like there was something with this stuff. I was like, yeah, man, like I'm scratching at the surface of something. And I think that if I keep pushing at this, I'm going to find what I'm looking for. And I think that I think that the moment for me that really like set me, I think was like an affirmational, like, yeah, man, this is it, was two things that happened to me. First is I did a residency at this place called Signal Culture, which is around still. They used to be the Experimental Television Center, but Signal Culture, look them up. They're amazing. They're basically like a video art studio. And I didn't know anything about them. And I applied to do a residency there because a professor of mine had done one and he told me that I should like check it out. And I went there and they had like all these insane analog video synthesizers and they had all these like vector synthesizers and crazy oscilloscopes and just like all these books, like this huge like collection of crazy books about like haunted media and like all this shit that was just like I was just eating up. I was like so interested in it, and it was in this weird, at the time it was in Owego, New York, which is like in the middle of nowhere, and it was like this for like a week and a half. I went to see a bunch of movies, and I was the only one in the movie theater. It was such a weird place, incredible place. It was one of those moments where there's so many sensory things happening with it for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I felt like I did when I saw the Moog. I felt like I did when I saw the Moog project. I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. This is fine. All the neurons in my brain are firing. Like this is what it's all about. And that was a moment where I was like, all right, man, I'm gonna take this more seriously. I'm gonna like trying to learn. I'm gonna try to learn this shit. And that was really important. I think that was really what gave me. It gave me like a, man, there's like this stuff's out there. This stuff's out there and people care about it. And it's not obvious to me yet, but like I know that if I stick with this, like I'll find my niche. I'll find my voice with it. And later on that summer, I did another residency where I was like the sound artist in residency at this institution called the Watermill Center out in the Hamptons on Long Island. And I basically like did sound for this theater director, Robert Wilson, who did Einstein on the Beach with Philip Glass. That's like that's like what he's famous for. And I basically was like his sound guy for a summer. And wow. It was really crazy. That's when I really was like in my first time being in an environment that was like predominantly theater arts and visual arts, and kind of being exposed to all that and being around it. And I kind of had a moment where I realized like, oh dude, like the only reason that these other artists here are like, they're like, we're the same. They just like have confidence. They're like pumped up with what they're doing. And it kind of was like a lesson to me where I was like, oh, I should take myself seriously, not too seriously.
No, but once you take yourself seriously, then you shift from hobby, like enjoyment, to like, this is my career, this is my art, this is my expression. Like there's an air that changes. Yeah, not too seriously, of course, but like it's like the difference of No, please.
No, I was just gonna say like I had a moment where I was like, no, like I'm like a realized artist. Like I'm not like, not this isn't like a glorified hobby. Like
Right.
I'm meant to be doing this, and I'm meant to be in this situation. And like, it was kind of an important moment, like a fork in the road of what I was doing, where I think maybe if I hadn't done that, I maybe would have hung it up sooner than I did, which I haven't, So, and I think that was kind of my moment where I was like, oh, this is serious, and like what I'm doing matters, and it matters to me, and I want to keep doing it. So yeah, I think those were kind of, and those things kind of happened in the same like 4 or 5 month period, and it was kind of an important moment. And right after that, when I got home, I had a little bit of money saved, and so I bought a bunch of analog gear. I bought a capture card. I started to learn how to like record on my computer. I figured out how to use Resolume a little bit, like just enough to get by. And then the pandemic happened like 6 months after that. So I was really, and I had all the shit. Like I had all the stuff at home. Like I had just gotten together kind of like my kit, my setup when the pandemic happened. And it was really, I think that was a huge part of why
I could be stuck at home for 3 years. Yes.
Yeah, it kicked off. It was really, my timing has been god awful my whole life, but that was like one moment in time where things just fell together, and I was just like in this perfect situation to like really indulge myself with these things in a moment of silence. And also like people were interested in it because everyone was just like,
they wanted to stream,
for however long. So
for sure.
Yeah, it all kind of fell together, and I'm just like I am an experimenter. Like I think I'm an artist, but I'm also like I'm an engineer. Like I'm very much like interested in how stuff works and the technical back end. And like my day job is as an EP engineer, so I do all this stuff. But it's also like I can learn. Like I'm keeping my brain fluid from becoming covered in cobwebs at the same time, which is important to me. So awesome. Yeah, it's kind of a.
I do want to jump into in the second part. You have on your website you have these 3 really great like points about you and who you are, investigating the possibilities of a lost future. It really jumped out at me. I want to talk about that after. But yeah, I just it's awesome to hear your story. It's like there's so many similarities between people's origins and like how they kind of got really inspired and went to like their who I am now kind of thing. But it's so fun to hear like a unique one where it's like really like the trajectory and like the entry level or entry point into it is from such a interesting pain, almost like kismet, happenstance, but also like directed through your like engineer mind. Like I'm sure you're also the type of person that's like loves solving things, right? Like you have this old shitty TV and it doesn't work, and you're probably going to spend hours making it work, or like I can see that's kind of like that there's an enjoyment there, your engineer brain, let's say. So I can imagine that was probably a really fun time, COVID, like the experimentation and also the recognition, right? Because people want your shit, which is always a good feeling. We're going to jump into your set soon-ish. But I just wanted to talk to you about two small things. I guess 2 big things. Teaching classes and workshops. You're a pretty prominent teacher, and I guess you just told us that you're doing some sort of I forgot the word that you used. What is it?
I was like an adjunct professor, like
adjunct
a part-time.
Adjunct professor. Has that been teaching and like moving like knowledge? Has it always been a passion of yours? Obviously now when you're teaching like, I would imagine you're teaching more oriented to the world that we're in. But yeah, just tell us about that. I like hearing people's experiences about teaching and imparting wisdom, because it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I think that's something that everybody should be passionate about, because it's such an important aspect of humanity and the world and the arts, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think I am where I am today because I had some professors in college who really took me under their wing, and not just like intellectually, but like my mentor, who's like, my dad, basically like my father figure. He like he ran the studio at UArts, and he like hired me, and basically like me and like the 3 or 4 other studio engineers were like his little brothers, and it was like it's one of these things where like really like
nice.
yeah. And so I think for me, my college professors like do I remember do I remember half the shit I learned? It's like not really, like some of it, but I think like the experience of like having a mentor exposing you to ideas and exposing you to kind of like worldviews, and also showing you that you are capable of figuring stuff out on your own is like really, really important. I started, I'll be honest, and I'll out myself, as I started teaching because I needed a job, and
Okay.
I was offered. Someone was like, "Hey, like, do you want to teach these summer classes?" And I was like, "I don't have any plan for the summer, and I like need money. My job is at the studio that's not open during the summer." So so I started doing it out of necessity, but as I started doing it, I realized like, oh yeah, this is I like this, and I like, I think it was David Foster Wallace who famous author, said in an interview, I think with like Charlie Rose or somebody, he said, when you're teaching, you end up feeling kind of guilty because you feel like you're learning way more than the students are learning.
Ooh, wow,
and
that's so great.
I think that for me, when I was teaching, there was a bit of that. Like I was definitely
Self-growth, kind of.
learning a lot. I was learning a lot, and not only was I learning a lot about subjects, like because I would be like, shit, I have to fill 15 weeks. Like I don't you realize really fast that like what's why I have a lot of respect for stand-up comedians now, because even if you're a bad stand-up comedian, like it's not easy to go up there and chew up half an hour. It takes a lot. So I think
unless you're like Brendan Schwab and whatever, then you're really not doing anything good for anyone.
Well, unless you're a natural. But I feel like there's not a lot of naturals with teaching. Like I feel like there's not many people who are like born natural educators. Like it takes a lot of trial and error. And for me, the thing that I think I like took away from it is that it's really being able to have conversations with students and talk to students. It's really profound. Like it's really an important thing. And I think not just like in terms of what you're giving them, but like just what you're experiencing with another human being in that relationship. Like what's supposed to be like a really truly like benevolent, like mentorly situation, and giving somebody information, and when someone's really receptive to it, them taking it, it's like a really important thing. And I think it's like one of the most important things like in the world and the universe is education.
Wow.
And so I think I think that like this is such a rarefied art form, and like so is experimental music. Like so much music and like electronic music, so much of it's like word of mouth. Like the stuff I just told you about the vaporwave scene in New York, like that shit's not written down anywhere. That's like me talking about it out loud. I mean, maybe it's written down somewhere, but I think so much of these art forms are oral. Like there's such an oral tradition with a lot of this stuff. And I think Steve is an amazing example of somebody who's like shared stuff. He's shared stuff with me, like even when we've just been working together, that's like it's just shit he knows that like, and so I think to me it's like this kind of profoundly important transition of knowledge that like we've as a human species have been doing since the dawn of time. Like it's how our cultures survive is we write stuff down, but it's also like the oral history of like experiencing something and like conversation with somebody, because those are the things that like get tied into your memory and get tied into your emotion and all those other things. And I think like if we lose our educations, and we lose the ability to educate and be educated, like we lose a really important part of like who we are as people. And so and I think that like again, like my experience of education has been really positive in that I've had like some really amazing professors who have looked out for me and mentored me over the years. But that like the profound value of those things to me is important. And so I don't, I try, there are certain things that I don't necessarily divulge immediately if I'm teaching with people, but like, I try to, this stuff is important, that this lives on. Like, I don't see the point in gatekeeping information, because like, anything could happen to me tomorrow. But if I share, and if we share, and if we collectively are together and like piling these ideas up into places where we all know them, like, we live in a super individualistic culture, and I get that, but like sometimes to me this stuff's more important than like me. It's more important than the individual. It's about like these tools living on in for all of us. So that's why, I do care about education, and I didn't at first, but as I did it, I was like, oh man, this is like really important. This is, yeah. I was also young, like shit, when I first started teaching. So like, I needed money, and I was like, all right.
I love that. I love that quote, that David Foster Wallace quote. That's such a good one, and it's so true. That like that there's like that reciprocality of teaching that you as a teacher gets. Like, and the students don't even have to really necessarily be active in it. It's just like the action of teaching, is like in itself your learning. Whether it's just having to break things down simply, you kind of go through your processes, whether it's revisiting something that you did to impart so much value. And then obviously like you said, like the legacy, like showing people, ways to do things that they wouldn't know otherwise, and, passing that on so that it lives on is so potent and so powerful. And really, thank you for sharing that. You're very eloquent in your way of talking. You're like, it's funny because you have this Philly accent, but you're like very smart and eloquent. It's this interesting. I'm like,
there are a few of us,
Half of me is like, oh, this is like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and then I'm like listening to what you're saying, and I'm like, nah, this is not It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I gotta.
That is a very smart show. That is.
I gotta keep myself true to where I come from with the
for sure,
native rampant accent.
So you have this awesome collective, Luminous Abstract, and you have this awesome record label, Liminal Editions. Can you just give us a little bit of a rundown of those before we head off into the set, and just tell us about them?
Yeah, so Luminous Abstract is a collective that kind of came together out of just, as any of the best collectives come from, like, it was just some friends who we were doing a lot of shows together, and we decided, like, why don't we get a studio, and why don't we just like pool resources in like a more efficient way than we're doing it right now. Instead of us like driving all around from each other's houses to like grab gear, like we could just get a studio and like do it this way. So Luminous Abstract is where it's me and John Krajewski, who is Signals _ etc. Cats Digital, who is another Philly, pretty well-known Philly VJ, and Richie Brown, who's like a man of a million talents, and he's like an animator and just does all sorts of wild performance art. But we're like the kind of the core members of this collective, and it really just started because we were doing like projection mapped like ambient shows basically in churches in Asbury Park and also in Philly. And so now we kind of are this lighting design / VJ / video art. I don't want to call us a production house because that's not what we are, but like we do events. We work with a lot of people in Philly. We just did this film festival in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. I projection mapped this whole ballroom for this big gala, and we like projection mapped the outside of this opera house. And then I did like a VJ set for a band while we were there, and John, my partner, did like this Eraserhead remix show where they like they did like a live score to Eraserhead, and he like chopped up and like and him and his partner Shelly like did like this crazy live like VJ manipulation of Eraserhead. It was really cool. So we do like, I think there's like a a good embodiment of who we are and what we do. Is like we're not really one thing. We're kind of like a coalition of weirdos who like just want to make weird art and put on shows and VJ and do like performance art. And you know, we're always looking for new people to work with. And like there are some animators and that we've done work with. But yeah, that's who we are, you know, and we're always kind of looking for the next weird thing to get involved in.
Nice.
My label, Liminal Editions, again, this is another one that I was so sick of dealing with independent labels when I was back in like 2019, 2020. I was just like, man, I put these records out on these indie labels and they like give me a hard time, but then they don't get anything back. Like, it's not like I'm getting an advance. Like, it's not like I'm getting like off this shit. Like, you're just giving me a hard time, and I'm putting music on your label and I'm not getting anything. So I basically was me and my buddy Bashful Slasher who we kind of decided, hey, let's start this label, and he's still involved, but it's mainly me running it now. And basically it was like, I'm gonna make an indie label that any of my friends or anyone who approaches me can just put music out on. Like, I'm not gonna, like, there's not a lot of requirements. Like, I do vet stuff, so it's not like a total free for all. But we've had some like amazing artists find the label and like put stuff out. Like, we have this artist from Scotland originally, Rachelica, who does like this crazy like bubblegum vaporwave pop that's like incredible. And I've had like this guy from Nashville do some really cool ambient music. We've just had like a really, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. I'm not like super active with it at the moment because I just have so much other stuff going on. But you know, if anyone's listening and they want to put out something on a label that will just put out basically, you know, whatever, if you have a cool idea, that's what Liminal Editions is. It's just like and like I also put my music out on it because I'm just like sick of dealing with other people. So it's you know, it's kind of, that's where the genesis came from, was I was tired of getting heckled by these independent Bandcamp label jockeys, and I was like, I could do your job, and so I started that label. But it is a passion. I do care about it. It's definitely something that, like, I joke about it being not serious, but like, I'm glad I have it, and I do put time and energy into it, and it's been fun. I've met a lot of cool people doing it, which was never something I thought was going to happen when I started it. I thought it was going to be a joke, and then it was like, actually, sorry, you thought you were going to start this thing that wasn't going to be serious, and now it's serious. It's like the you did your job moment.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's audition. So yeah, if anyone's interested, you're always welcome. A lot of the music is just for free on there. So yeah, go check it out. It's linked in my thing, my IG bio.
Hell yeah. Yeah, definitely go check that out. I think I haven't jumped into it yet, but I definitely will after this, and now hearing you talk about it. And I kind of like vaporwave. I'm not like a huge, you know, I don't know, I'm weird with music. I think my brain has been fried by the you know, decades of psytrance, but I do love all types of music, like you know, I really do. And recently I've been getting so, not really into it, but if I'm at a festival and there's like a drum and bass stage, I'm heading there after my VJ set. After my VJ set, I'm heading there right away because, like, that's the type of music that no matter who's playing and no matter what's going on, you're gonna feel good. It's gonna pump you up. You're not on a journey. There's no journeys. You're just fucking going at it, you know. And I kind of like, you know, it's just fun. So I've been really loving that.
I mean, I'm all after you.
No. I was gonna take it something completely different. I want to hear what you have to say.
I was gonna say, I mean, I'm not like deep into vaporwave anymore, but it was. I mean, I still like a lot of that stuff from that period. I'm all over the place with stuff. I've been listening to like a lot of dark wave and like a lot of like stuff, you know, like post rock and things like that lately. So I really, it's all, you know, I'm all over the place, and I think that's also like important. One of the things that, like, if I could say anything about like my process is like I'm not I don't discriminate in terms of like where I pull inspiration from. Like, I don't care. Like, I'll I'll go see anything, and like I don't care. And if it sparks something in me, like I'll go with it. I don't, I'm not like a vaporwave guy or a drum and bass guy, or whatever, man. I'll do goth night. I don't give a shit. Like I know, I'll go and do whatever your new order dance party you want. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been recently like there. You get those the Spotify like retrospective of like your year, and it's so funny because my top 3 were like System of a Down, Nick what's his name, Nick he's like from the 60s, but it's like Nick Drake, and like whatever baby songs, like baby music, and it's like like. I love System of a Down, but I've only been like re-listening to them now, like the past 2 years. I don't know why. It's just like, that's just like kind of nostalgic. It makes me feel something. It brings me back to like a certain thing.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. I listened to
best.
The other day in the car, and I was like,
good.
Yeah, this record's really good. This like I want to not like this, but yeah, this record's really good.
And it really like brings me back. I think it's like that kind of like with Psytrance, it's kind of similar, where I have so many memories of like experiences and dance floors that it's like I very rarely listen to Psytrance on my like just music, but when I do hear it, it like invigorates me in that sense. And there's some albums that do that for me, and I'm not like, I'm very rarely will go out and like experience new music, like sometimes my Spotify will send me on somewhere. I'm like a major reggae guy, like I have a lot of reggae, big fan of reggae, and that's like fun to always experience and discover new reggae, because reggae can get kind of repetitive. But what I was saying is that like whenever I get to introduced to somebody who has like a label or is making music, and the person is fascinating or interesting, I know that the music, regardless of the genre, is going to be the same as well. So yeah, I'm excited to go and listen to your music after this. All right, awesome. So we have this really exciting set here for us. These the analog sets are always awesome. So I'm excited to see what you have for us. So take it away.
All right, so here we are. This is my kind of a facsimile version of kind of something I would use live. I typically, and I'll screen share my Resolume set after I kind of talk about this stuff a little bit. I will always sort of have Resolume as like my final thing, my final stage of my setup. And I will use both pre-recorded content in Resolume as well as analog content. Typically what I do live is I have this CRT here, which is the illustrious, everyone's favorite, the chosen one, the Commodore 1702. This monitor right here, I actually have 2 of them, but this is my live monitor. You can tell by the stickers and how fucked up it looks. This is my live monitor. I know it. It's an instrument. This is an instrument. It's it is like a guitar, like a trombone, whatever, a piano. Like this thing has its own personality that you kind of it's got a personality. I'll say about it. So I usually use that with this guy right here, which those of you who are initiated in the analog space probably recognize this. This is the Tachyons Plus Dream Weapon. I don't have this plugged into my chain right yet because it gets a little crazy and I want to kind of show what stuff looks like without it first. This is just a little test monitor because I have another video mixer over here that isn't doing anything. It's just in the loop. And then the third thing that I have here, which has been something I recently got that is really fantastic, I really, really like, is this Sony DFS 300. This is the actual unit right here. This big rack unit. It weighs like 30 pounds. It's gigantic. This is actually just a controller for it that you plug in with like a D sub. But this is a broadcast special effects processor. Basically, all that means is it was like the zenith of early analog video, like broadcast technology. These things could do like 3D transitions and they can do all sorts of weird digital effects. And they're really, really cool. This is the manual for it, which I had to literally go and buy off eBay. There's not a PDF of it anywhere, but it's really a lot of shit. As you can see, I do, and I mentioned this earlier, I do commercial AV by day. So like this is awesome. It's not that weird for me, but it's not for the faint of heart. But it's really, really cool. And right now I have it set up with a camera to do some feedback. So let me readjust this. Camera feedback is sort of a dark art. I feel like it's sort of a magical thing that people really associate analog video with. Is monitor feedback. So I have this. This is a Canon camera right here. I'm just gonna adjust some camera settings so that this looks better. There we go. Nice. So, you know, a lot of this, you really got to adjust the camera and adjust your recording camera really particularly. Feedback is super sensitive to virtually everything, like the ambient light in the room, your ISO, your shutter, things like that are all going to affect every little element that you're dealing with camera feedback. So I'm going to try and get this like started. Let me get something going here. You need to like kind of fire it and like get something happening. Which I had something really nice happening earlier, and then of course it stopped happening. But
are you just playing with the shutters settings?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the focus to kind of do what I want it to do. But now I'm gonna go and adjust camera. There we go. Okay. So I'm adjusting some settings on the display itself, and now I can start using this Sony DFS guy to start to do some like spiraling effects, and I can zoom and start to get. Why am I not getting the thing I want to get here? There we go.
Nice.
So I'm kind of adjusting zoom and
wow.
Let me get.
Cool.
There we go. Now we're starting to get something that's looking better. Sorry. Man. I had something really nice happening, and then of course it stopped.
I mean, it's super cool. Like you really have to like wrangle it in, right? And it's like once it stops moving, it's like, well, if you make too much movement, you'll get something different, and then it can just spin out of control. It's like a very feedback is awesome. Feedback is so cool. It's just like the feedback in Touch Designer, you can just press a button and reset it. Here, you can't really reset it, right? I mean, I guess you could just put your hand in front of the camera, but...
No, so it's definitely like, I'm making a couple of adjustments here to kind of just to flow a little bit more aggressively.
Damn.
Yeah, so you really gotta play it and start to do things like spinning it out, and you can adjust focus to get.
And the colors are just like inherent because of like, is it a hue rotate or something? Like what's?
So there's a hue control on the display, and you basically want to use the hue control on the display to kind of rotate the hue.
Interesting.
That's kind of a key. And sometimes I'm trying to refocus this a little bit.
Whoa.
All right, so I'm not getting the best results right now, but that's kind of how video feedback is. Sometimes you kind of struggle to get, sometimes you don't have the best of luck getting stuff to do what you want it to do, and that's kind of how it is.
Is there like a process though, or is it very exploratory?
So it is. It's definitely exploratory insofar as every element, you know, in your chain is gonna affect stuff. Try this. Let me see if I can. There we go. Starting to get a little bit more of a bulb now. I know, like, you do it enough, you start to get at a place where you can like get certain things to be like really repeatable. Like this setup, I know, like I can get these sort of spiral effects going and happening. Like I have now. Some of that is stuff that I like know how to like eke it out. However, yeah, there's a shit ton of external factors. You know, like the amount of ambient light in the room is like really a big factor. The amount of like honestly, I think like working in daylight tends to be a little bit better. It's almost better for there to be like some light in the room when you're doing this. Also, like the camera itself is like wildly important in terms of like how.
What camera? Is it just a normal Canon camera, or is it like on purpose an analog camera?
This is a Canon GL. What is this? I think it's a GL10. So it's like the skater cam from back in the day.
Gotcha.
Like,
so it's digital, but it's old.
It's DV. Yeah, it's a DV camera.
Okay. Oh, it's a mini DV. Oh wow.
Yeah. So they're really good for this type of stuff. Yeah, and there's like a whole cult of people who are like super into these cameras specifically. It's really kind of bizarre. Like I found a bunch of internet forum posts about how people like just fucking love these cameras in particular, which is really cool. I'm like glad like people like go after them to like restore them and like collect them now. But yeah, I'm starting to get something.
These effects are so cool.
Yeah.
It's
so
cool, it's like, it's just like I it's one of those things that I'm like, you know, after you do it for so long, you got to be able to know what you're doing. But then I also know how feedback works, and it's probably like so difficult to replicate things, you know?
Yeah.
It's like a very flow state oriented tool, I would say, no?
Yeah, I don't typically do live video feedback for this exact reason, for what's happening
right now. It just might not work.
Which is that, yeah, like it's difficult to get it to like predictably be good. So I'm gonna zoom back out and kind of go over a couple of. Oh yes, this is my giant stack of VCR for dubbing. I more often than not these days will pre-record things like Liquid. I'll pre-record video feedback. I promise that I can get way cooler looking video feedback than what you guys just saw. This is just an unlucky moment where, of course, when I'm like doing it for a recording, it's like not going to behave the way I want it to. But that's also, you know what? That's also like a good, that actually is accurate. Like if you're interested in getting into analog, like that shit happens all the time. Like, oh, I have to get a video made and it's due in 2 days, and like I can't get things to behave the way I want. So, I mean, these are also machines that are like old, so like they heat up, and like the elements in this will change as it heats up, and the properties of the camera will change as the analog components heat up. You know, like an oscillator and a synthesizer drifting. Like these things are not digital; they will shift as they are left on in an environment. This is, I'm gonna put this in my chain. So the Dream Weapon is kind of my favorite glitch box I've ever used. I kind of think it's the greatest glitch unit there ever was. It's really a fantastic item. I will get this repositioned into the camera so we can kind of get some feedback and some glitch stuff happening. Hold on, why is this? Okay, so what I will do typically live is I'll have the CRT and I'll be sending content to the CRT and I'll be processing it with the Dream Weapon here. And I will use a camera like this, actually pretty similar, to rescan the CRT and then get that back into Resolume. And once it's in Resolume, I then, project it out to wherever, whatever I'm doing, wherever I'm at, whatever my final output is. So even just doing this on some like raw feedback, you can start to get, I can start to get some reactive stuff here. Of course now, because my feedback doesn't look the way I want it to. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So the way that these tachyons kind of boxes work a lot of the time is they're going to act on the analog signal in like it's essentially filters. So a lot of this is like the colors are all getting filtered out in like really specific kind of weird ways. And if any of your listeners, any of the people listening to this show, know anything about analog video, basically all the color information is super high frequency, like kilohertz type frequencies. And so these are like weird high pass, like all these circuit bent points on here are doing like various different kind of high passing and filtering that is creating all these insane like color burned effects.
Super cool.
And so you kind of learn with the Dream Weapon in particular, there's like really like a lot of it's one of the more replicatable glitch boxes I've used. Like I kind of know how to get it to look a certain way pretty consistently. But also, again, it's like very, very sensitive to the kind of stuff you send it. Like you need to kind of send it the same sort of stuff if you want it to kind of do its thing. And generally speaking, like high contrast is really important. A lot, I have people hit me up and they'll be like, like I want you, can you just like, process this video for me for like my music video. Like, I don't need you to edit it. Just like, can you run it through whatever? And I'm like, yeah, sure. But like, I just want you to know, you're sending me this like 4K video file that I'm going to have to downscale into the analog domain. And it's just not gonna, it's not going to look right. Cause it's not like these devices designed to
don't
work.
Have the same color
yeah.
space.
And like, it's I find myself a lot of the time telling people like, no, like give me like a silhouette against like a white background, something simple, because that's the stuff. And I mean, like if you look at other glitch artists, like Tachyons is an amazing example. He just did the music video for Justice After Image. He did all the glitch processing, and that video is like, if I was teaching a class right now, I would show that video and be like, that is what you're looking for, because it's just like, it's people on like a black background and like silhouettes moving and like dancing. And that's like glitch. That's like Thanksgiving for glitch. That's like,
that's the shit. That's the glitch.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you want. So let me open up my Resolume and show. Yeah, so this is the part of this podcast where everyone is going to find out that I am actually a cave person and not particularly smart or good with actual video art tools. I basically use Resolume as like a glorified sample playback engine, and I can actually show you guys. I'll do a windowed display so we can actually see some decent looking video feedback now. Yeah, so this is what video feedback looks like when you have it doing its thing and it's not all messed up and you're not having a hard time with it. But essentially, yeah, Resolume, I use it as just a big ass sample player. I don't do a ton of manipulation in Resolume. I mainly use it to get things to do projection mapping and to do NDI stuff when I'm working with a lot of people. And I use it to play samples, video clips back for me to manipulate. And then, obviously to play stuff out. So this is a clip I recently did with some with video feedback that I did for like a gallery type thing. I can turn this down. I'm sorry. It keeps on closing my window. And this is some like Internet Archive ephemera collection, kind of found footage stuff that I manipulated and did some video feedback stuff on. So this is, this is a kind of a flavor of what you can get. This is with the Commodore monitor. And yeah, I use this a lot for like projection mapped surfaces because I think it looks really cool with the bodies and all that. I also, just for also another little bit of context, every type of CRT or LCD screen gives you a different flavor of video feedback. So like this is with a CRT, and then I can show you this is what happens when you use not a CRT but like an old school Dell LCD screen. It's like a completely different behavior. Like it's much more wormy, doodly, and like it kind of has this much more holographic type of look to it. So it's really it's like painting. Like it really is like something that it takes a lot of discipline with, I think, and it takes a lot of patience. And I've spent a lot of time recording bad stuff. Like I think that's something, if you get into analog stuff, you just need to accept is that like you're gonna make a lot of bad recordings, but it's important that you record everything because you can keep track of what works and what doesn't. But yeah, these are just some examples since I failed miserably in showing. And I have a ton of, I've been doing this long enough that I have a lot of this shit. And this is another kind of piece I did that is using the same dance figures, but it's using I'm just glitch processing it instead of doing feedback. And again, I use this a lot for like architectural kind of things when I'm doing like large scale projection mapping, because I think the bodies tend to like get people's attention, and like when people see like a figure, I feel like it just does something nice.
Connects you with grounding.
Yeah, and these pieces and then the fish are sort of like I use them a lot live. They're kind of I don't want to say like signatures, but they're as close to like a kind of a signature thing as I have that I'll use live. And then also I have this bird that is really, I did this thing this past weekend at a film festival, and I had there are these big archways in the ballroom, and I had them all projection mapped out, and then I used this bird, this dove flying across them. And it was created this really, really cool effect. So that's something a lot of the time I try to consider when I'm like making content is like what environment. And I think that's something that I'm informed by my history in music too, is like what kind of space am I in? Like what does the room sound like? What does the room look like? Which I think visualists tend to be pretty receptive to that in general, but just a food for thought. But yeah, so like I need to rebuild this live set. I have a ton of liquids in here, and it's something we haven't talked about a ton, but I kind of have a pretty big a background in doing a lot of liquid light as well. Let me change this to my composition. So this is obviously not like the best way to be viewing any of this stuff, but I essentially have these decks, which once upon a time I thought that I was going to like organize stuff in a way that would make sense for me to be using the Resolume decks. I'm not doing that here, but I do still have these organized. This is all LZX stuff that I used to have like an LZX system that I don't have anymore, but this is all stuff from that I kind of recorded with the analog video synth. And then this stuff over here is like all stuff I did in Max MSP, or I have some analog stuff over here, but like a ton of Touch Designer stuff, like a ton of instance. I just love like instanced geometry. I fucking played geometry constantly when I was in high school. So like, I love that. I love the like Touch Designer's ability to make like really interesting like large scale kind of surfaces and stuff like that. I really love. It's really intuitive for that kind of stuff. So yeah, just as you can see, just like tons of stuff in here. And I will build sets specifically for events that I'm doing that are like larger events where they have like, if somebody has assets, if it's a band that has like a bunch of stuff they want me to use, I'll put a set together for that. But this is my like, hey, can you do a gig tomorrow night set where I just have like all my shit in here that I can pull out. And at the bottom here, I have of this first layer, I have this separate group down here, which this is basically for me to send analog content out. And I have my advanced output set up in a way that this was from this projection mapping gig I did this past weekend. So this is not a great example, but I'll have like a separate output going to a converter, going to the CRT, and then I have this coming back into my deck link here. So yeah, you can even see me right here coming back into the capture card.
Nice.
And that's how I do that. So yeah, I'm not the most devout Resolume guy. I know it is like the jazz standard for VJs. I've been experimenting with VDMX, as I'm sure you can all see. I have that down here as well. I like it. I'm kind of getting used to it. Resolume is still what I'm most comfortable in, but yeah, it's not again, as I kind of said when I started this, like these are tools, they're paintbrushes in the painter's arsenal. So I'm not really married to any one tool. So like this is like
before you first of all, like, thank you for sharing all of this. And there wasn't like this is exactly what we want to see from this kind of exploratory kind of thing. Yeah, continue what you were saying, that you don't have a lot of stuff. You usually do something.
Yeah, so I mean, my thing, I really I try to make all my own content. There's nothing, I have zero problem with anyone who uses stuff that they get from elsewhere, but that's just my personal way of working. I really like to make all my own content, and so to me, I'm less, I'll watch video tutorials of like people doing just the most insane shit in Resolume with like layering and using the different blend modes and like using the effects, and I think that's amazing. My partner John, he does that. He's like so much, and like I'll just be at a gig and I'll be like trying to do a simple thing, and he'll be like, "Bro, it's this," and I'm like, "Oh, that's why I got you around, because you know how to use this thing." But like the way I work with this is I essentially treat Resolume like a big like MPC video sampler. Like I'm just playing clips with it, and I manipulating speed a lot of the time. And I do some of this stuff as with this clip, this anime clip I have going here. I have like a random transport happening, so it's like jumping around, kind of like a chopped up thing. So I'm not a complete Luddite. I do know how to do some stuff in Resolume in terms of like the traditional VJ kind of tricks, but yeah, I'm mostly using it to just play back content of mine, and then using the advanced output to like accomplish whatever I'm doing with projectors and things like that. It's absolutely like on my I was gonna say New Year's resolution, but I realize it's May. It's definitely on my to-do list to get better.
Resolution.
A half year's resolution to kind of get more skilled with actually like really taking full advantage of what this amazing tool has to offer. But I think we're all victims sometimes of our own like, hey man, I'm doing gigs and it's working kind of mentality. Right. So that's why when who has the time? When's there the time to reinvent the wheel? So that's kind of where I'm at with my setup at this point. I don't, I use the video, I use an output to send stuff to the analog gear, and then I feed it back into the capture card, and then I.
So that's kind of what I wanted to ask you, like, because you kind of mentioned it, but you do send stuff from Resolume into your analog mixer? Like, you will do that?
Yeah, so I have this analog out channel down here, and like
Gotcha.
typically what I'll do is like I'll just like show like really quickly. I'll throw like a new I'll create like a new advanced output. And for those of you who don't use advanced output, it's really quite, I mean, it seems complicated, but it's not. I'll just create 2 screens, and the second one will be going to whatever display is showing up as my output for my converter. And then I just grab, analog out, and I put input opacity off, and then I can just send stuff out to, this layer, so I'm sending this out to my CRT or my analog mixer, and then I'm feeding it back in through my capture card. So it's really, really simple. MacBooks really can only support 2 HDMI outputs for the most part, unless you have like one of the really high end new ones. I think the M4s, you can do 3. But so that's the one real limitation with this setup, is if I have to do multi-projector stuff, I need to use a media server, which I have a Mac Mini that I use as a media server. But I tend to not want to do that for simple VJ sets because it's just like more shit I got to carry. Right. But the beauty of this setup is that like I can roll up to a gig and I can just bring my small little analog setup, and I have my laptop and my capture card and my camera, and I can just do like a glitched out analog set with like relative ease. And I think it's really cool that that's like Resolume can really handle that pretty well. And it's definitely not something that it's designed for. It's not something that like the Resolume engineers were like, we want to make sure you can integrate this with analog gear, but it really does integrate with analog gear pretty seamlessly. And I try to tell, I try to encourage my friends who are like analog heads, like, hey, you can really make these tools be symbiotic, and they really can blend seamlessly together. And likewise with people who are really in the digital realm, I sometimes am like, hey, if you get a capture card and a camera, you can start to do some really weird stuff with Resolume or whatever it is you're using. And I think you can kind of bring out the best of these tools when you do that kind of blended approach.
For sure. Yeah, Resolume's such a multi wrench tool, but specifically for what we're doing. And yeah, I think it's a pretty good, I shouldn't call it a media server, I'll get in trouble, but it's a pretty good like a middle range kind of like intermediary video mixing kind of like media server. Doesn't have the
I don't know,
media server, but
am I out of pocket calling it when I said media server earlier? Is that like a contested term?
I'm half joking. We have this this group on Facebook full of like motion graphic artists, and I'm very vocal about not my distaste for Resolume, because I'm more of like a real time person. So there's always like, oh, Resolume's a media server. I'm like, no, it's not. So I'm just half joking.
Yeah.
But,
well, I'm glad. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what your position on Resolume is. I kind of have like a love-hate relationship.
I use it. It was my first tool of VJing. I use it when I need to use it. I just don't have. I don't do much VJing recently. But when I do VJ, I very rarely have any videos to play, so I just don't really need it. And I'm so engrossed into Touch Designer that I can't really run more than 2 programs. You know what I mean? Like I have Unreal running and I have Touch Designer running, so it's like having Resolume. But then again, that being said, if I have video files to play, I would use Resolume, because running video files in Touch Designer is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's weird. I want to like start to build out more like Touch Designer things. That's part of the reason why I am interested in getting into VDMX, is because the newest version of VDMX, you can actually load Tox files in there.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so I'm at like this point with Resolume where it's fantastic for what I need it to do when I need it to do that thing. But like, I definitely feel like the layout is not the best. It's not how my brain works. Like I'm forcing a square peg into a round hole or whatever with the layout of it.
Yes.
And I feel like and I feel like I'm at a certain point you start to want, like I feel very comfortable with like doing VJ sets now, and I want to like kind of start to get more expressive and start to integrate Touch Designer and do things like that. And I think that there's like a little bit of a hard cap on what, like I describe Resolume as like, it's really good at a lot of stuff, but it's not great at any thing. And when you want to start to get results with one thing, like you kind of start to feel like you need to move away from it. But
That's why I don't like to call it a media server, because a media server in its conceptualization is supposed to be something that can do everything really well, right? Like it can't, like a media server is not going to be a video mixer, right? But a media server is going to be able to do mapping really well. It's going to have like high-end video output. It's going to have good hardware. It's going to have, you know, the ability to build like UI and controllability things. It's going to have ways to mix different aspects, but it's not like you're not going to have a library of 1,000 videos and mix them. You could, and there are, most media servers can do that. But if that's your goal, you'd probably want to use Resolume and pipe it into a media server. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, sure. I don't know. It's like, I think Resolume is probably the best introduction to VJing, like as an art form, just because of the nature of it being a video mixer. So like if you were going to introduce people to analog video, the first thing you'd show them is a video mixer, right? Like here's A, here's B, here's a mix, right? Like it's kind of like one of VJing is like you have an image and you're mixing it in with another image. So I feel like for introductory to VJing, introductory, that's not a word. Introducing people to VJing is through Resolume is a great way.
I would also add that the educator in me, I try to teach my students practical stuff, and I think there's a very practical reason for using Resolume, and that it is like you can get work. Like if you can use Resolume, like get gigs. So as much as I'm kind of like whatever about it, I do tell students, I'm like, like if you want to go out and you want to start like working with DJs or whatever, like Resolume is probably your best bet because it's what the industry standard is. Now, I don't like do I agree with that? Like not really, but you know, who am I? I'm just a guy. I'm just some smart, you know?
I'm just the guy.
I'm trying to give good advice and take my opinion out of it. And the good advice is like, you know.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for showing us into your realm of analog and digital mix, and that's kind of exactly what I was not what I was expecting per se, but like what I wanted to see from you was kind of like where those things interact. I personally loved your feedback. So anybody that has any problem with your feedback can bring it up with me later. I thought that was very good feedback, and it's just, again, it's like it's cool to see the mix, you know, and I don't think a lot of people are doing that, and please just continue doing that. And what you said about Touch Designer, I could talk forever about Touch Designer, but I would definitely highly recommend for you to get deeper into it. It's one of those things that's like a language, and once you start talking that language, then you can express yourself in it. You know, like right now you might be able to find out where the bathroom is and find out how to order a thing at a table, you know, but then once you be able to really like write a whole novel, then it's like the floodgates open, and I think you'll get a lot out of it because of just the nature of Touch Designer and the brain of an engineer and a person who's influenced by music. That's like Touch Designer is, you know, it's the of the situation, you know. So it's like it's really where you're gonna be at.
I mean, it is the future. I feel I like every day I see more and more like crazy Touch Designer stuff. I feel like it kind of like it is inevitable, like that it is going to be the unifying. Like I feel like eventually it's going to be like an industry standard in its own right.
I would honestly say that in some places it is. You know, like if you're going to work at an immersive interactive studio, if they're not using Touch Designer, then they're not like really get out of here.
Get out of here, buddy.
Get out of here, buddy. Go back to New York, eh? I don't even know how to do a Philadelphian accent. I'm just doing a New York accent. It's like gotta be like high pitch a little bit. No, like there's a little bit of high pitch here.
Yeah, no, they're similar. They're definitely similar. On. They're more similar. They're much more similar than either New Yorkers or Philadelphians want to admit, but like they're kind of the same. Like they kind of sound.
New York's a little bit it's got the Jew, you know, it's got the Jewness in it. You gotta be like you gotta do the Italian kind of like thing. But the Philadelphia is a little bit more like, hey, come on, where am I going here?
Yeah. For sure. It's more nasally. It's more in the nose.
More nasally. Okay. Anyway, such a weird tyrant to go on, but I wanted to. You mentioned it a few times in the post in the preset, and I really want to know what this is, and I kind of think I do, but I want to hear it from you. haunted media. Like, is it what it is?
So haunted media is like conceptually. So I'm super into Mark Fisher. He's a writer, theorist. You may be familiar. I'm sure some of your listeners probably have heard of him. He was like a music journalist for a long time. And he kind of got into sort of this socialist kind of like the slow cancellation of the future, capitalist realism kind of theory. But haunted media is like sort of a part of this this lineage of like what media, the way that haunted media and hauntology kind of frame this is that like because we live in like a media saturated world, the media in general, like internet, recorded music, film, all these things have kind of served to like warp memory, like we can never escape the past, and the future and the present are all like intermingled through these forms of media. And like what that's created is this really weird temporal era. And like I could write, somebody could and has written like long books about this sort of temporal condition we're in now, where like the past haunts the present and the present haunts the future. Like all of these things are sort of brought on by like technological advances, and so haunted media, like broadly speaking, is like it's not one thing. There's not like one core tenet, but like the idea that media formats, like tapes. So great example is J-horror. So like the movie The Ring is like a textbook film that like deals with this idea of haunted media, like the videotape that you watch and 7 days later you die.
Gotcha.
But what is that? But what is that? Or like a movie like Pulse, which again is like a famous J-horror film. Like, what is that movie really like? Yes, it's a horror movie about ghosts and the internet, but like it's really about like the condition of modernity and like what we as people now deal with, like living in this kind of fucked up atemporal flux. And so like haunted media is basically like this thing, this genre. It's like a genre that like examines what media, like what the confluence of horror and science fiction and like our lived experience in like the digital era. So like another example of haunted media would be, we talked about David Foster Wallace, so I'll say Infinite Jest is a really early example, or not early, but like the idea of like this screenplay and this film that you watch and kills you, So, and like the whole like political implications of this terrorist cell trying to get this piece of media that can kill people, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm trying to think of some more like significant, or another really famous example that gets talked about a lot in like fucking scholar papers is the original broadcast of War of the Worlds. The original broadcast of War of the Worlds, people thought it was real. People thought the Earth right. And so that's like a famous example of like the power of like the paranormal in media. So I think I'm giving like a not great, like this is kind of
no, this is awesome. This is a super interesting overview.
There's a book, I believe it's just called like Haunted Media or something, that's really good, that like goes through talking about this kind of genre that deals with all this and kind of talks about like what are the philosophical underpinnings of social science and things like that. Like what does it say about like late capitalism, and what does it say about like the social state of things and things like that. But yeah, it's really fascinating. It's something that really influences my work. I'm really, really into that kind of shit. I'm really, really into like the idea of like media being this like sort of sinister tool to kind of warp perception and like muddle memory and kind of manipulate memory and things like that. Why I love vaporwave. Vaporwave is haunted media, baby. What am I'm forgetting the. I talked about vaporwave like 10 times, but like vaporwave is a really of like this warped media that is like from a ghostly origin, aesthetically. So clearly that's like a part of my creative DNA. Is I'm very fascinated by that type of thing.
Are you?
So if you're
Yeah, I mean, sounds like a pretty fascinating topic. Are you interested? Are you like spiritual, esoteric? Like, do you kind of focus on this kind of stuff, or is it more like the paranormal, unknown, occult kind of ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of any of these things like literally. I mean, I'm not like
Right.
I'm not particularly spiritual, and I don't particularly believe in any like literal paranormal activity with any of these things.
Uh-huh.
However, I do think in the same way that astrology is like a tool, like astrology is a
Right.
candlelight, like the
Right.
darkness of the human psyche, right? Like
Right. Right.
anyone
Right.
who thinks that like astrology is stupid is like, well, you're missing the point. Like,
Also,
sure,
it's
it's
like
not literal.
every like psychology is all based around this idea. It's just
Yeah.
kind of coming from there.
Well, it's what I talked about earlier with like myth making and like
Yeah.
narrative building. Like these are
Right.
tools. Like we humans, the thing that differentiates us from every other species on this planet is our ability to like form narrative and to have
Mm-hmm.
memory, to have like
Story.
long-term
Yeah.
memory and form stories. And so I think things like astrology, things like ghost stories, things like
Mm.
religion, like they're fascinating and they're really important. And I think like obviously I don't endorse any like extreme worldviews, but like I think it's really important to like embrace all of these different things as parts of like the human experience to like express and explore. And I'm really into like this kind of haunted media stuff, not because I literally believe in ghosts that live on the internet, but because I think it tells us something really important about ourselves. And it's a way for us to
Mm.
connect to ourselves and a way for us to express ourselves in these stories without being literal. Because like to
I
be
love
like,
that.
yeah, we're alienated. Like, yes, of course we're all alienated under like capitalism. Like that's the whole thing. But that's boring, and people have said that. What's much more interesting is to like tell this really enthralling aesthetic journey or story,
Mm.
like using this weird subgenre of horror or
Yeah.
whatever.
A metaphor or like, yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
For
And like
sure.
in our world, our world is metaphors. We think in metaphors.
Yes.
So that's
100%.
kind of that's kind of I'm not spiritual, but like I think I'm not spiritual, but I really appreciate the spiritual, like as an
Right. Right.
abstract.
Right. 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 Right.
You know,
I
I
appreciate
I
that.
also, yeah, anything that can like provide wonder, I think is
By
really
the way,
important
I
because
not to be a dick or anything, but I would consider that spiritual. Just
yeah,
you're like
and yeah, I mean, and if that makes me spiritual, then like so be it. Like
right. Then so be it.
I'm not
I would
like I don't
maybe
care.
maybe it's like you don't adhere to like a belief system or something like that, but you still see the value inside of like these stories and ideas and concepts that surround belief systems.
Yeah, and I would love to be proven. Like I would love to have like a divine experience. Like
Moment.
I'm not like an anti divine experience guy. I just like I haven't personally experienced it, but I think it's really important. And
You got
if
to go
that
to
makes me
church, Grant.
spiritual,
You got to go to
then like
church more
listen,
often.
listen, if that makes me spiritual,
You
then like
got to get
then
baptized.
I am a fucking
You
baptized.
got to get
I'm
circumcised. It's not even my religion. It's the wrong religion. What I meant to say is you
I
got to get circumcised. You got to practice all the Jewish holidays, and you got to go to synagogue. You'll have.
man, listen, I lived in New York long enough. I know a little bit. I know a little bit about it.
For sure.
Yeah. So I think
Well,
it's all important. It's all important.
so I guess maybe like as like a bridge, the flow state, right? I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm sure you've been in it, especially as a musician. Kind of like being in that state is kind of like synonymous with playing instruments, and then VJing for sure. I just had this great conversation with this awesome artist, Reka. I think her last name was Polenka. I don't remember, but Eastern European, super cool girl. And we got into this discussion about like the flow state and where it comes from and kind of like the connection to the source. We were like, woo-wooing kind of hippie spiritual conversation, which is my favorite. But I think that even outside of that woo-woo spiritual stuff, the flow state is kind of almost like an altered state, right? Like you're
Yeah.
obviously familiar with psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, and you said it in a really great way. The bizarre and eerie alternative states of being that exist beyond and beneath the end of history, which I think is so nice, such a nice line. So flow states, right, are kind of like that touch into those altered states. Like you're basically in some sort of meditative state, but you're creating, you're expressing. So like, you know, when you're meditating, and this is like very not necessarily like specific to any specific type of meditation, but just in general, right? You're kind of tapping into something internal, and then it could also be external, right? Like astral projection, or like, you know, breathing techniques that are gonna, you know, bring you into some sort of different state. And a flow state is kind of like, it's kind of like that, right? Like you're internalizing this expression that's putting you into such a meditative state that you're now at like a higher state of consciousness where you're able to do the thing that you're expressing. Like you're able to do your expression at such a high rate, at such a high frequency. And sometimes I like to think, and in this discussion with Reka, we got to this idea that like, you know, maybe there's like maybe there is a collective consciousness that when you're in the flow state, you're just kind of like a conduit to this bigger thing, right? And like the collective consciousness, I call it God, you call it something else, people call it source, people call it nature, divinity. You know, it could even be a function of evolution inside of a simulation. I'm totally down for that. But at the end of the day, you're still tapping into something bigger than ourselves, a higher dimensional kind of idea, and you're like refocusing it, and in our case, refocusing it into like cool visuals. You know what I mean? Do you ever
For
do you
sure.
ever like think about that? Is that something that comes into your aspect of thinking?
Yeah, so I have two distinct thoughts about this. And the first is that I have never been a performer who, like, back when I do music sets, like live sets, it's always improvised. I never prepare anything. I'm an improviser. That's all it is to me, because I have no interest in performing prepared work, because for me it is the ecstasy of performance is in that ritual of improvisation and the moment of it's very satori, it's very zen, it's very like, that is the moment that there is one moment, and it's that moment you're in when you're improvising. It's like truly you are touching upon something that is
Divine?
you're tapping in.
Okay, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sacred, there's a sacredness to it, and divine for sure. I could also describe it as divine. I think that that's really important to me. I really care about ritual. I'm like very focused on ritual, because I feel like we have been robbed of ritual. I like, maybe not everyone, but like me in my life and like my world experience of living in the world and working and like just being a person, is I feel like a lot of our some of our social ills is that like we've been really robbed of our collective rituals, and there's like fewer and fewer things that like we are permitted to have that are like true expressions of like human ritualistic kind of experiences that are not like attached to money, or not attached to some political mechanism or some bureaucratic mechanism. And to me, I feel like true like improvised, getting into a flow state and improvising and performing improvised art and really not thinking, turning off your brain in some ways, turning off your frontal lobe, allows you to kind of tap into that ritual mind that I think that like we have lost touch with. And I think we're a lot worse off because so many of us have lost touch with that. And I think that I think that the jazz guys, I think like Louis
you never
Armstrong,
see a sad jazz guy.
I think they were the pioneer, at least in America, like they were the pioneers of like Zen improvised music. And I think that like the expression of like pure unbridled creativity and like a flash of a moment is like, this is divine. There's like a divinity to it. And I think that like you know, the flow state is one of the ways to experience that. And I think it's really important. And I think it's one of the reasons that we're artists. I think it's one of the reasons artists become artists. You know, DJs become DJs. Anyone who's doing this creative, expressive kind of thing live, like one of the core tenets of it is this idea of this state that you can kind of tap into this thing that's larger, that's beyond, that is greater. And I think there's such a hunger for it now more than ever, because I feel like we're so deprived of it in such a collective way. So yeah, I really care about that so-called flow state. I think it's something I definitely find myself getting into at times. And I think not always, you know, I think that's part of the thing that's challenging about it is like, you can totally not get into it sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah, for me, at the end of the day, like I'm an improviser, and part of the reason I'm an improviser is because that's the magic and like the payoff and like the sacred kind of ritualistic aspect of like entering that space and executing and being a part of it with everyone else in the room is like, yeah, we don't have it elsewhere. Like I fiend for it. Like we all do, I think, to some extent.
For sure. It is a fully psychedelic, out of body experience, or at least it can be if you get, you know, if you're in it for a long time, and it produces really, really, really good shit, right? Like you said, the jazz, or like, you know, when it comes to, just from in my own personal experience, I'm sure yourself, whenever I'm in that state, first of all, I'm having the best time of my life. And also like what I'm seeing is something that I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm doing something that is not me, but it's from me. And that's like very potent if like you want to think about what art is in general, right? Like that expression, that's hopefully coming from a place of authenticity, right? You're like, maybe even a place of emotion, right? But it's like going to be an authentic emotion. Like, what am I feeling now? Not like what I want people to think that I'm feeling, or, you know, do I want to be cool? Do I want to be interesting? Do I want to be edgy? Like, those are all fine to make art from, but I would say like the core idea of making art is self-expression, and self-expression inherently is authentic, because otherwise what is it, right? So I think that those states are they should be revered in that sense of like, yeah, they don't happen all the time. And you might do a 12-hour gig and not be in the flow state once. You might do a 1-hour gig and be in the flow state the whole time. So, you know, I think it's like, there's lots of different books about how to get into the flow state. There's lots of different techniques to get into the flow state. But personally, I'm like you. I like to improvise. I like to come kind of like clean, no expectation. I'm coming to do what I would like to do. I want to enjoy myself. And I also have I think that at least for the past 6 years of me VJing and doing art, I come at it from like, everything's real time, everything's generative. Now I don't use any videos, but like when I was using videos, it was always like as a backup. It was always as like a texture. It was never as like the main thing. And for me, like the deeper I get into this real-time generative like space, and like this kind of like, you know, in the moment, it's only lasting once, it's going to be different every time, the more I kind of like build myself a little like entity inside of my set, and like my touch designer patch and my Unreal patch, that's like almost like, okay, it's a little bit foo-foo, but like, you know, it's almost like it exists outside of me, you know what I mean? Like it's something that I built and I iterate on, and it's a system, and like when I go and perform it, it's like I'm just kind of like a conduit to whatever it is. And I really love that. And I feel like a lot of the analog stuff is kind of like that, because you're working with physical aspects, right? You're working with liquid, you're working with feedback that you don't really have much control over. It's kind of like an entity, right? It's based on physical properties. It's based on the energy. It's based on like the...
Like, you know, it's like you're not controlling it. You're guiding these forces. You know?
Totally.
It's like nature. You're not. You really can't exert some control.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. And I feel like there's a lot of pleasure in that when it works, right? Because you're not only are you connecting to something that is connectable to, right? Like something like you said, like nature, organic, like you have no control, but you're connecting to it and you're guiding it, and then you're creating something beautiful out of it. It's like a very reciprocal kind of thing of like, you know, nature is giving you the opportunity to make something beautiful, and you're giving nature the opportunity to make something beautiful. You know, there's
Yeah.
it's a very
Yeah,
powerful
no,
thing.
I think, and I think one of the thing to me that's most important about art, and something that I think is really, that you're hitting on, that I definitely feel, is that, to me, one of the main points of art is that it allows us to envision things that we haven't envisioned before. You know, it allows us to see an alternative. It allows us to imagine a different world. It allows us to get outside of ourselves and see things in ways that we have not previously seen them. And that's like a really, that, you know, is divine and is kind of mystical. And like, I think that those states are like, when you enter one of these states and you're able to kind of have an almost out of body kind of psychedelic experience, that is really kind of important, you know, to the human experience. And it's when we stop doing that, when we don't do that, that's when we become stuck, and that's when we stop being able to imagine a future and imagine a different thing. And like, I'm very, you know, I have my own kind of like political opinions about art and stuff, but I think that like, it's, no matter what you believe in, like, you have to be able to envision an alternative and envision like a horizon to what you're doing. And I think that is something that's so essential to like what art is for us as human beings. And I think like entering these states is like, those are the moments where we can create a collective experience, create this kind of ritual environment, and like imagine something new, imagine something else. Like, it's really, you know, we're so stuck, it feels like sometimes, as a culture and as like a civilization, that I'm like, man, we just need everyone to do that more. We need everyone to have, whether, and even if you're not an artist, even if you do something else, like athletes or something, you know, there's other people who kind of get in these states, like, or, you know, just people who are observant, who meditate, who pray. Like, these are like, we need to just, in whatever way, as like human beings, like, it's important for us to all be able to experience these things.
Totally. And it's we are stuck, but we're stuck in a loop, right? Like, history repeats itself. The nature of evil repeats itself. We're in this propaganda loop. We're in this, like, you know, every 5 years is the same thing. Every 10 years is the same thing. And it's like, these moments, these, you know, observances, these rituals, these things that we're talking about, they help you observe that we're in a loop. And once you have the knowledge of the mundanity, of the cycles, then you have the ability to exit it. Now, it's a choice, right? You can definitely take the red, you know, you take the blue pill and stay, you know, or is it the red? No, you take the blue pill and you stay, right? You can stay in the loop. You can be part of it, but at least you have a choice. At least you made a choice, and you're not just inside of inside of the matrix, and nobody told you and you don't know what you're doing. And again, like, take the blue pill, no problem, you know, but you did it from your choice. And I think that that's a very, very important aspect. And you're right, like, people are stuck. People are inside of these like mundane aspects of reality. You know, they get their dopamine fixes from I mean, I get my dopamine fix from my phone too, but like, you know, some people, that's all they get. You know, some people, you know, they get their food, and the food is what's making them feel, and whatever. And it's like, they don't have, you know, they don't have the ability to see past the mundanity. And like, yeah, some of them do get to see that through divinity or through some sort of, you know, religious experience. But a lot of the times, if you're mundane and you're stuck in a loop and you go to religion, you just get into the same loop. You know, religion can be a terrible loop. Also, it can give you community and it can give you spirituality, but then it's also like, you know, you start hating everybody who isn't in your religion, or you start wanting, or you go to war, or you blow yourself up, or, you know, you occupy whatever, et cetera, politics. So I think that it's like, it's not just about, you know, the mechanism. Like, it's not just about going to pray. It's not just about, like, you know, meditating. It's not just about ritualism or flow states. It's once you're in those places and you're given a vision or an idea of something that isn't just the same thing that you're doing every day, now is the choice to make of like, okay, I'm going to break this cycle. I'm going to get out of the mundanity. I'm going to do something that my passion. I'm going to follow my dreams. I'm going to, make the world better, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I think through art is a great way to do that, right?
Yeah.
Another discussion that I was having with this amazing guy, hopefully he's going to be on the podcast soon, part of the Node Institute, Stefan, I don't remember his last name, but the Node Institute, awesome educational platform for learning touch designer and different generative stuff. And we talked for like a long time about politics and world and all this kind of stuff. And then, I kind of ranted. And then and I was realizing, I'm like, oh fuck, I'm like ranting now, all this negative stuff, and he's agreeing, and we're agreeing about how everything's bad. And then he said to me and that's why we do what we do. I'm like, oh fuck, that's right.
Yeah.
That's why we do what we do, right? To break the shittiness of the reality and also inspire others, right? Maybe I'm performing, maybe I'm teaching, maybe I'm doing the podcast, somebody is gonna experience, somebody is gonna take that expression that I'm doing, that we're doing, and now they're gonna want to do it as well, or they're gonna be inspired to do something else. And that's a really simple, easy, direct, and quantifiable change that we can make as artists. And it doesn't have to be conscious. You don't have to create to think I'm gonna create this art piece to make change. It could just be literally, I'm expressing myself, and it's authentic, and somebody loves it and feels to want to be authentic as well, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's it's small things that kind of shift your perspective and what you're doing. And I just love that, and I think that intention is very important, right? If you intend to make change with your art, then even better, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. All power to anyone who's deliberately trying to incite change with their work. But also I think that just making work that is interesting to you, making art that you feel inspired by, and being participating in art and music as a wider community, that's enough, because that is more than enough to light the spark, and maybe it'll take a while, but sooner or later, if you're participating in that collective experience, you're going to have those moments, those sacred moments. I don't think you certainly don't need to be doing, again, props if you are, but you can do it on your terms. I think it's just as important that people are doing it on their terms. It doesn't always need to be something more than that.
100%. Well, I think we're getting to the end here. I just wanted to ask you one more thing. And this is the third line that you had, or maybe it was. Oh, maybe we met the investigate the possibilities of lost futures. I love that line. There's something about it that really speaks to me. Can you tell me what that means? Can you give me a little bit of insight into that, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, so Lost Futures, that's a Mark Fisher thing. So if that's interesting, he has a lot he writes about it. But basically, the idea, and this isn't just him. There's several people that kind of talk about these things. But the idea that progress is linear, that because we live in the world we live in today, that this is the only basically okay, the world is the way it is, and it's the way it is because this is the best way. The things that won, the technologies that won, and the cultures that won, and the societies that won, they won because they're better. That seems to be a prevailing logic of Western civilization in the 21st century, right? That the Berlin Wall went down. The Soviets lost, so here we are. This is the way it is. Liberalism is this is the political of all culture. And the idea of lost futures is that it's not there's plenty of dead ends technologically, culturally, economically, socially, that didn't necessarily pan out, but were viable alternatives to the way things played out. And I think a really good example of that is looking at technology. We we live in this like digital computer age, right? But like a lot of what made the computer, a lot of what like brought us to our like current digital existence was like military spending, like military.
Internet.
Like the internet was universities and military and like, like all these things. So like, what if we didn't go that direction? And what if like analog computers, like what if analog computers were like a thing that were more prevalent longer?
They'd still figure out how to make bombs from videotapes.
Sure,
you know what I'm saying?
but the thing
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
Without getting like too deep into like nuts and bolts of it, like the idea of being able to like envision like what a lost future is, like what is this future that never came to be, but like but could have been based off of these various things. So like an example is like the cyberpunk future is like that's like a well, what if there's kind of a what if element, but then also if you start to like examine like what cyberpunk is and like what the main tropes of it are, and you can kind of start to see like, well, where did we diverge? Like what happened with our culture that like we don't live in Blade Runner future, we live in Children of Men future. Like we live in like these different and the idea of like the lost future again is like we can examine technology, we can examine analog technology, we can also examine like old school digital technology. Like what about GeoCities, what about MySpace, Tumblr, like these things that have existed that had like models, like social models built into them that are obsolete now, but they presented these kind of alternative ways of existing and these alternative ways of communicating, and basically looking at those things and using them to question where we are now. Like where we are now maybe is not the best place we could be, and how do we look at these other dead ends that maybe didn't happen because of some fucking business decision somewhere. Maybe some private equity fund killed some company that could have presented us with like some
the death of the electric car. You ever see that movie, The Electric Car, from the 80s, late 90s?
Fantastic example. That's like kind of a sort of lost future examination, or like looking at stuff like steampunk, like things like this that are kind of like, well, what if we went this other way technologically?
Tesla, like the original Nikolai Tesla.
Yeah, actual Tesla, like stuff like that. So I think that like lost futures is, obviously like examining, or like a music example. Yeah, Burial. Burial, I think, is a really great example of an artist who tries to capture this kind of lost future aesthetic, because he makes these tracks that are like these like requiems for rave. He's making these tracks that are like these like they're like the haunted memories of what rave was, but it's not. They're like these sad kind of like melancholic dubstep tracks, and they have like a sense, like Mark Fisher talks about how they have like this real sense of loss in them. And like Burial as an artist didn't even go to raves. His older brother went to raves and told him about it. So he made these records based off of like what he envisioned these things could be. So that's like I think that's really powerful. And like his music is so expressive about like the condition. Like I think he is like the quintessential 21st century electronic musician insofar. I think he captures
what is this genre?
Burial is like dub. I mean, it's like early dubstep. It's like UK, not like American dubstep, like UK dubstep. If you haven't listened to like Scream,
I've never heard this.
Kind of. Oh my god!
I don't know enough about dubstep. I don't know enough about
it.
But I just listened to the Burial. It's pretty sick. I'm going to listen to it for sure. Sick.
Yeah, no, Untrue is like one of the greatest records of all time. But when you listen to
that's the one I got. This one, this Untrue.
It's this very potent kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, Death of the Electric Car, another good example. And the Lost Future is just a tool for us to unlock maybe something that we missed, something that got lost in the mix that we can revisit and maybe envision, maybe find something sacred and something that was overlooked. I don't know.
Right. Like almost well, you said investigate, right? That's a core word to the thing, is like, what is the point of investigation if not to find something? And then, when you find something, then again, you make the choice of what you do with it. But I think the act of investigation is to find something. Fascinating. Really, really love that. I'm going to take out Mark Fisher as well. I think that was a really good call out. Yeah, I mean, Grant, this has been such a nice conversation. I'm so happy we did this. I'm bummed that we didn't do it earlier, but whatever. This is what it is.
Hey, worked out.
We have to investigate the lost futures. And yeah, we'll
everyone's
have to do it again.
Investigate the lost future.
For sure. That's a good one. Lovely to meet you. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we go?
Not off the top of my head. I don't have anything coming out soon, but keep an eye out. Midi Lizard. There might be some more tapes on the horizon, some new music. Just keep an eye out. If anything I talked about was interesting to you, feel free to message me. I'm an open book. But like, I just appreciate if you made it to the end. Holy shit! Congratulations, because that was a lot of something. That was a lot of heady rambling from me mostly. But yeah, thanks for listening. Thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun. I don't get to do stuff like this enough, so I'm really, really happy we made it work. And yeah, thank you.
Wow. What an episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Mantis Smash for the intro and outro music. Thank you to Sophie Holder for the amazing internship helping us with all the episodes. And thank you to the guests for coming on and spending time with us. See you next week.